Okay. Hi, Joe. Can you hear us now?
There it is. Yep. Hello.
Hi. Thank you Joe, for joining us via Zoom. You'll have to tell me if it's better or not after to be on
Okay.
Zoom versus being present, but I won't put you on the spot right now. So I'm going to call a meeting to order of December 21st, 2022. I'm going to do a roll call because there are different rules as it relates to when you have a member on Zoom participating. So the roll call. So Joe Emmerich, can you say here, present?
Yes, present.
All right. And Kate Ryan?
Yes, present.
And Liz Cobbs?
You're present, yes.
And Bill Marachek here. All right, we have a quorum. Also, just for Joe's and everyone else's information, I was informed that if we're going to be doing any voting on any particular item, then this will have to be done again by a roll call. That's the requirement when we have a Zoom participant, which is fine. Glad that you can join us. So we do not have finalized minutes for presentation tonight. We're still within the rule as it relates to how many weeks since the last meeting, and we do have one set of minutes that are being reviewed by town council to make certain that it is appropriate and it fulfills the necessary requirements. So those will have to wait to the next meeting. So we're going to move on to the.
Yeah. All three sets that were out there are now in your hands, Amy, right? So we're up to date.
Yes. Yes.
The law requires being there that we need to just make edits, and I haven't been available since we sent them.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So that's
You on vacation.
I appreciate.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that the work that Liz does on getting these minutes completed. So thank you, Liz. All right, we're going to move on to item 3, which is the miscellaneous compensation schedule updates. Amy, I'll let you proceed.
So I will share my screen. Terry and Joe, can you hear me okay? I know we had trouble with audio last time. I think we're okay this time. Thank you. If that changes at any point in the meeting, if you can't hear, would you please interrupt us? Because I know even the tape last time is a bit of inaudible. So if there's a problem, we'd rather know and try to address it.
Sure.
It's much better than last week.
Good, yeah, the other device wasn't working last week, so I think we're good. Okay, and you can see my screen now. Okay, the miscellaneous compensation schedule. So, what the miscellaneous compensation schedules are a little different than all the ones we typically look at. We often look at the one for regular status, non-union employees. And the one that we're looking at here is for temporary and limited status classifications. And limited status are those that work less than 20 hours per week, or they work on an intermittent basis. And just to give you an idea of the scope, we can have easily like 350, 400 people that fall in these categories within a year. In addition, would be roughly 330 regular positions that we have throughout town. Okay, so wide variety. There are even some positions on here, people that might only work once or twice a year. That's how, and others that are here regularly. So these give us a framework to work within, but you'll see some wide ranges, and they're meant to be, in many cases, a little bit more generic titles that give us the ability to work with whatever we might need when we have a need to bring in somebody in temporarily, or, you know, again, on a limited basis. And the influences in the ranges, again, will depend on a number of factors, budgets, how many hours that person's working, just what we know about market, what it takes to bring in a position for that might only work for a week versus one that's here regularly. So we're we're regularly looking at it, trying to address those and have wide ranges that meet our needs so that we can operate quickly as we need to. In some places, we're also considering internal equity like we do with all of them, if it relates to something, a position that is a regular status position or just within these groupings. And so, as you're probably aware, the Massachusetts minimum wage scheduled to increase on January 1, 2023. That's been happening on an annual basis for several years now. It's been going up 75 cents an hour. As a municipality, we are not legally required to comply with the Massachusetts minimum wage. We're only required to meet the federal minimum wage. That said, Concord has had in all my time here a longstanding practice, ethic, whatever it might be, of keeping our ranges there. Not with it, if there was ever a time where we couldn't fund it or there was something that we still have the ability to not provide minimum wage, but that's not what Concord has wanted to do. So with the minimum wage increasing, we have moved all of the range minimums to at least $15 an hour. And in some cases made some other incremental changes to either maintain a relationship of what they had to another position or increase a maximum that might be related. So there are, again, a wide variety of things happening in these schedules because of the types of positions. So we look at it, we just make sure that it's something that we can work with. You may have, there could be some positions here that we have nobody working in right now, but we may just need the ability to hire somebody into that classification when we get to a certain point in the year or that sort of thing. We track the changes, showing you what those proposals are. There's two schedules here, the miscellaneous compensation schedule 1, that is for most departments, and that goes on for 2 pages. And then we've got the schedule 2, which is more specific to recreation, and we use this for 2 purposes. For all of the temporary and limited status positions, as I just discussed, same as for the others. But the BD Center presents us with interesting challenges in managing compensation because we have a few regular status employees that work multiple functions. So part of their day, they might be a lifeguard. Another part of their day, they might be a fitness instructor. And then for 2 hours, they might do a private dive lesson or something like that. And each of those, although they can take dive off. So, so each of those comes with a different rate of pay. So the way we've addressed that is town meeting, like it does for all regular status positions, approves a very wide range through the swim fitness category. And then we use these as sub ranges for the different functions, is what we call them, to help us maintain pay rates and equity and all those other factors. So it's used for both. Most of the people that employees that fall into this are limited status and temp. We call them recreation associates, but we do have some of the regular status employees that could have multiple rates under here as well. And so again, Anna McEwen, she's the recreation director. She's sitting here behind me tonight because she and I work closely on the recreation schedule in particular, and that's always got interesting pieces to it. So if you have questions on that, she is here. But this is something that we worked on together. She's also recommended removing a few of the titles: dive instructor, private dive instructor, private swim instructor. We've been working together, Kelly, Anna, and I have been working together to look at ways that we can simplify some of the compensation structure for these positions. There's a lot of work involved in managing all these rates of pay and all of that. So we've been looking to consolidate them.
I have a question. So taking out dive instructor, private, etc., means no more diving instruction. That can't be, because you guys have such a great team and the whole thing.
Yeah.
So how is that going to be incorporated into the youth center?
Sure, it's a great question. So what we've found over the years is that a lot of those skill-specific positions are outsourced with vendors, with companies that have the experts to do that. So the high school, they hire their own team of coaches for dive. Our program on the weekends is through Boston Area Dive, excuse me, it's a vendor. So he runs those programs for us. We don't have anybody on staff that has been a dive instructor for years. And with the relationship that we have with that diving, I don't anticipate that we would hire. We would continue to utilize that group.
I have a couple of questions. If I understand correctly, and I think I do, is that you can have a person who does multiple tasks during the workday. So how do you record that? What's the mechanism? What's the technology? How do you do that?
We have time cards that our staff fill out every shift. So there might be a person that comes in and does a swim lesson for 1 hour, and then they support us on the deck as a lifeguard for the following hour. So when they fill out their time card, they notate what position they were fulfilling. And then our program managers review those time cards before they're submitted to make sure it aligns with the schedule that we had previously planned. So there's 2 levels of check and balance on it.
And what's the minimum amount that gets recorded? Is it a quarter hour, a half hour? What's the metric?
Any amount of time that an employee works for us, they get paid for. We typically go in 15-minute increments.
So that's sort of that's the known rule, so to speak, in terms of quarter increments.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
No,
That's fine. I've got 2 more, but that's,
no, you go. Oh, I'm gonna type because I've got your.
So, okay. So I want to go back to the miscellaneous comp schedule. And there are a couple jobs here that I'm curious as to your decision-making and what went into determining the new minimums. For example, the professional project specialist moved $5 an hour. The maintenance custodian moved $4. And that looks like to me 2 of the X number that are here that, that are being considered differently. So I'd like to sort of understand how do you determine that, and how did you determine the actual value?
Okay, so, there aren't going to be any people impacted by that, by the way. I just want to know there aren't people that are in those bottom ranges. So these are things to use if we need them. Look at a number of factors. The approach in the past was to have very, very wide ranges, pretty much going from minimum to a wide max so we get higher. We've been progressively working at narrowing those, and we're doing more definition to differentiate. So that's where when I see that, we really haven't been using that and need it, and we can differentiate between a custodian and maintenance custodian. We've been working to do that. I look at what the rates are in our union contract and our regular status position, and work to make a range that works. But sometimes how long we hire somebody for, how many hours, what their duties within these schedules can be pretty wide. So we've left it open to see what we work with it. So again, there's not an exact formula or something like that. We're taking just a number of factors and putting together a range that we can work with them, while trying to have something that gives people some limits and works towards that equity.
One of the factors, one of the realizations I have is that, we're certainly a much more required, I guess, based on some past history with other employees, to take a look at how these decisions are made for a particular job category. We know that you do not look at individuals. That's not what the determination is for the job category, so forth. But the personnel board simply, and I'm saying this because I think it's important for both Liz, or all 3 of us, Joe and Liz and Kate, that we're not capable really of having enough information or data to necessarily question, to necessarily provide input as to the numbers that you've come up with. And I'm not suggesting that's bad, but we have to accept the fact that we have, at least presently, limitations on what we're capable of having data in order to make a determination as to, I guess, whether it's right or wrong. We're back to reasonableness. Is this, based on what we're hearing from the town, a reasonable decision or not? And so, my conclusion is it's reasonable, but I don't know if necessarily, I don't know what more we can do. So I'm reaching out to Joe and Liz and to Kate as to, do you have the same similar concerns, or is this transparency point that I'm bringing up not necessarily as important as I think it is?
Hey, can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I had a similar question to Bill about how these rates were determined, the ones that aren't just moving to minimum wage. So I appreciate that explanation. I do agree with the point that Bill makes, that it is hard for me to assess whether these are correct or accurate based on, benchmark data or other, relevant data that might have been used to make the decision. I have a slightly different question as well, as far as the number of employees or how many people are actually affected by these changes. Because I think I've heard a couple of comments about people either not being in these roles or above the minimum rates. So are we actually changing people's pay here? Like, is anybody at the minimum rates in here that, or is this more just establishing minimums and most of our employees or all of the employees in the town are paid, well above these rates? I'm curious about that.
There will be employees at the minimum here for these 1425s. The senior worker 1425 to 15. I think there are some library pages. So there are some that will get that increase with the minimum wage. And also usually the group that's most affected, the library pages, we would do an incremental change so that if somebody at 1425 is going to 15 and somebody else that was at 15 would go 1575, for example, so that we move them proportionately. So numbers, I don't have that. I mean, this whole level of, I'm certainly open to figuring out what information the personnel board will need to look at going forward. I'm basing it on how we've done it for decades now. So if there's more that you want in order to review that, then we need to, I'll need some guidance for that to come to the meetings with that information that you think is important.
No, I guess I was going to say, maybe I'm coming at this from a little different angle, because I do work in HR for municipalities. So these types of charts are extremely familiar to me, and the rates and the rate ranges seem reasonable based on sort of I mean, I've done my own informal compensation surveys with other similar comparable towns that have, I mean, the town I work for doesn't have this wide range of types of positions in our sort of miscellaneous compensation schedule. It's similar. And then, I mean, based on the minimum wage, I mean, I actually, I'm not really sure what more data they could provide other than like a compensation survey of comparable towns. But then it seems that Concord is pretty unique in some of the positions that you have. So I'm not sure that they could even provide comparables. Is that accurate, or is it one of the challenges? Yeah.
Challenges, and because all of these positions are fully defined, they can kind of come and go. So that's why we try to get these wide ranges so that we can work within them when the need comes up, and then we look at it and say, oh, all right, we're going to hire somebody in using this construction specialist position. We haven't used it for a few years. what is this job that they're gonna be doing that fits under that? Okay, what makes sense this time around? What do we get for the budget? So it's pretty wide because of that. And yet, right, we can't, while adjusting the schedule, necessarily capture all of that and find it in another town.
So just to go back to my point about how much, I mean, that was what, that project specialist was a $5 increase. So in essence, because this is not, there's not necessarily a scientific or comparable data, you are making a judgment call. Someone else could say, well, it should be $6 increase. Someone else could say it should be $10. I mean, so, you know, we again, as a personnel board, just, I think, have to, yes, we need to provide whatever guidance to you, to the town, that we feel is necessary for, I guess, trying to ensure that when we vote and we agree on changes, that we believe we've tried to touch all bases. But we have to recognize that, you know, we don't have all that data. We'll never have all that data available. So we're making reasonable decisions based on information that we believe has been as closely vetted as possible. I mean, that's my assumption. So, Liz, do you have something you'd like to, or anything you could want to add?
Yes. So sorry, let me just get down your last thing. We won't ever have all the data. Okay, so I do think we have to try to find a happy medium. Only assuming, and I do recognize, and we made a decision, I think it was at the last meeting, on reasonableness, and there's some valid reasons to go that way. When it comes to all decisions about raises and so forth, I really do think what we need to do is get a dashboard that we can agree on, that we have up to date, so we have more information to go on than is it reasonable or not for all decisions. So it was right, and again, as all have said, we don't have a lot of background data, so we are kind of just taking the advice of those who've already made the decision. And it's, you know, we can ask questions, but, you know, we can't disprove reasonableness. I don't think we could ever disprove reasonableness, because we have a very reasonable person in front of us. So there's, you know, there's an attempt to get there. But the responsibility of the personnel board in the long run, I think, is to have more data available to us so that we can help with that reasonableness and better understand. So, and I'll say, I've said it at other meetings, these are really understandable changes, miscellaneous compensation schedule changes that we have to do, and there's a reason to do it with the minimum wage increasing. What I still have never seen is this strategy about positions for non-unionized employees, and why one position is going to be funded over another. So at select board on Monday evening, there was a presentation by the DEI commission. And they said it's very urgent that we need a DEI director. And the town manager's response was, we don't have the funds for that right now, but we'll work on it. And then at the end of the meeting came up I've forgotten the title that we approved, but it was for business development. And that position was going to go forward. And so why is that position gaining primacy over a DEI director? I don't know. And I don't have that in front of us for us as a personnel board to weigh in on. So I think the dashboard in one sense, and then a real strategy about why and what and where are those organizational changes that we need to take responsibility for. How are we to do that if we can't have any data to get us there? So those are two different issues, and understanding that now with the urgency of the decisions, we have the reasonableness clause to go for. But I'm not comfortable to keep going with that as we move forward into 2023. I think that, you know, we really do have to work with Amy, with your group, with the town manager more clearly to understand what the HR strategy is overall. And these are things that you have to react to. So I'm not saying this was done incorrectly at all. That's not my point at all. It's just that the responsibility of the personnel board really is to roll up our sleeves a bit more as per what we've learned over this, report from the PSTF and from the dialogue select board and so forth. So I don't see it as the long-term solution. And I do recognize, Kate, that your responsibility here is to, really give us some cold water about what's available in a municipality. I do understand that, and it's a really valid thing to have on the board. So I think the balance here is good. But I do think we have to find a solution that allows Amy to do her day job and to incorporate this idea of a dashboard so that we have something to go on. I'll stop talking now. So that was a long-winded.
No, thank you. No, that was good. Are you prepared, Liz? And this again is off the top of my head. Are you prepared to do a draft of what you mean by the dashboard
Sure.
and what you mean by additional, additional data that you would like to see? Because I think if we have something specific in front of us to take a look at, and for each member of the personnel board, I think that would be extremely helpful.
So
And
can I push back on that a little bit?
Yeah.
I feel like this is a little premature because we haven't really discussed what the personnel board is going to look like in the future. Like, what is our role? What are our responsibilities? What is our oversight? And without understanding that and having that in place, I think a dashboard is, I think that happens after. I mean, that's just my opinion.
So update the charge, is that what?
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like we have to understand what our charge is, what our bylaw says, what our role and responsibilities are as a board. And that's an ongoing conversation, and we don't have that yet. And I understand that there's like work on the table that we have to sort of move forward with the understanding that we don't necessarily have all the data we need to do it. But I just want to be sensitive to the fact that we don't, our charge is still being decided.
Yep, I think they can, I take your point, I've added in the minutes. What I think is that they shouldn't go consecutively, but, maybe some drafting of charge and bylaws first, but right behind it to get us to the dashboard, because my assumption is that we do have those responsibilities, right?
Well,
So,
yeah, right now, based on what our bylaw and our charges, which are,
Yeah.
conflicting in terms of what the two say, but
it's not going away. Though,
yeah,
right?
no, agreed, agreed.
Okay.
Terry has her hand.
Oh, sorry.
okay, yeah, yes, Terry.
Very interesting discussion. I agree with Kate. In the personnel boards that I've worked with, I've worked in 4 other towns and in Massachusetts. And the personnel board's charge usually says to set the salary ranges and to do appeals, but not to decide whether we're going to have a vitality director or a DEI director. That is put forward in a budget proposal that goes to town meeting to decide. So the town manager, I think, was trying to say Monday night that her budget is going to recommend an economic vitality director. This is an example of the things her budget will have, but it's not going to recommend funds for the DEI director. And then town meeting can object to that, complain about it, whatever. But the personnel board doesn't decide which types of positions we've never done it before, nor has any other town I know of in Massachusetts. The role is more to decide what they should be paid, have the internal equity, and that type of thing. So I think that getting the charge of the personnel board is really critical. And then you're right, from that, the dashboard will flow. Like, you should have data on how many vacancies do we have? How many positions are open? How many people are retiring and all this kind of stuff. And that's how I see the dashboard, but that would flow after you do the charge.
So Terry, one thing that does happen with the personnel board currently is we receive job descriptions and have to approve or disapprove,
Right,
right?
Just the
Right.
title, and where it falls in the grade, right?
Oh, okay, fine. So the title comes before us with a page of material that we have to review.
Right.
Okay, and some pages don't come before us. So we had the vitality manager come before us and we had to say yay or nay, but we did not have a DEI director come before us.
correct.
And
Because there is, that's right. That's right, because there is no proposal yet to fund a DEI director. There's no draft job description that I know of. There's nothing to come before you yet, because it's not even being proposed by the town manager to town meeting.
So, so what you're saying, and I was using that as an example, is that that's valid, right? So when I'm saying I would like to see an HR strategy, why are we saying yay or nay to this job title? I'm uncomfortable with that because I don't see why one is made primary over another. And you're saying that's not your job as personnel board.
Right,
That's
you're saying,
job
when
meeting
you're
to-
saying yay or nay to a job title, that doesn't mean you're agreeing or not agreeing to fund the position. It means that if and when we hire that person, this is the appropriate job title that goes with this job description at that salary range.
The town manager has the authority under the bylaw to create positions and determine what the duties are and to assign them. So that's not, it's not, the personnel board isn't deciding whether it exists or what the duties should be. The reason that the personnel board is looking at it to see, does it make sense? Does the classification, the putting it into the schedule, the title and salary grade, is that approved? It's about that piece, but not the decision or the position itself. It doesn't come to the personnel board until the town manager has created a position using the available funds that town meeting supported.
Okay, so I fully support what Kate put forward, that we need to put our charge and bylaws in order first.
Yeah.
Because I'm going in the wrong direction potentially, because I had a different idea based really on coming in the middle of getting this report onto this personnel board, right? And trying to understand what we're supposed to be doing. But your sense is that, and Amy, what you just described is that's never going to happen, right? The idea of wanting an HR strategy and understanding why one position over another, that's town meeting and that's town manager. That's never going to be personnel board in your view, right?
Well, I mean,
I agree too.
I mean, there's always somebody could choose, there could be a change to the bylaw or the charter or the structure, so I wasn't really thinking about whether it ever would happen. That's up to the town to decide how it's going to run it and whether in the charge there's some role for the personnel board and all of that. I'm just saying right now that is not the rule.
Yeah.
Yes, there are a number of opinions or proposals related to a future role of the personnel board. The task force didn't make the determination that that would be it. They're just saying what their findings are for the select board. So I'm still operating under the bylaw.
Okay, okay. So I'm gonna have to use the video to get all that down, but thank you very much. I think I have more clarity. Joe, you're newer than me. Do you have any other comments, or was that making it more confusing for you?
No, it makes sense as far as the approval of jobs and who's authorized to actually choose what positions need to be filled. I still don't know that I'm again, I'm new, so still getting up to speed, but I'm not entirely clear on how rates are determined, for the town. I mean, if I look at this list, like, it seems reasonable. I can't dispute that, which you guys have put forward. But I don't have, like, what I'm used to in my background in comp is having some sort of benchmark data that would have comparable roles in other towns with their ranges, as well as, which positions the town might have more turnover in, where we might need to focus in and look at that position compared to some of the others. And then, like we were talking about earlier, some of these are just adjustments to the state minimum wage, which is pretty obvious why those are being made. But there's some other pieces too, like going to the $15.75 or the $4 or $5 an hour. So not to continue to beat this one, over and over, but I think in the future, what would be helpful for me, I'm speaking personally now, as I look at this, if our role is to have some guidance in whether the pay is appropriate to, appropriate, leave it at that, is this data and kind of benchmark information, as we look at these types of schedules in the future.
All right, thank you, Joe. A couple things that come to my mind that maybe sort of go into a parking lot. Parking lot is a term for items that may need to be considered or you want to consider in the future. So one is that I think, Liz, I'd like you to just comment on if we had the vitality manager, or we had a new person manager job description, that in the past we haven't obtained, we haven't asked for other data that is being used in our current classification system to make the determination that this is where that job goes. That job is assigned. My feeling is we've always accepted what the recommendation is, but we haven't really peeled back an onion to try to say, oh, okay, so this is the basis for why that decision was made or not. So I think one of the things we could consider as a personnel board is to be clear as to what additional information we would like from the Human Resources Organization that would help us feel more comfortable that a new job is being placed in the right classification. I think that's one point. Maybe that's the only thing I really had to
Barely
add.
caught up, Bill, with your comments, so.
So Amy, you had in prior meetings, you've talked about how you sort of determine or make a recommendation for where to place a new position or even a reclassified position in a class. And you have a method. Is that what you're referring to? Having to understand what that method is and maybe provide that along with the.
Yeah, so that's what I have tried to do so the personnel board is we adopt a method. Like this recently, it was HR, we're basically bringing in their method. The personnel board has been involved in approving the selection of that vendor and that method. The personnel board has not been involved in applying the method and all of that scoring. So it's how can we communicate, what information do you need along the way to know that is being applied. And so that perhaps is a greater discussion of what's the methodology for that. That's sort of the conversation that's been going on for many years now. This kind of circulates to all we got here is that right? I know in some towns, the personnel board themselves do it. They don't have an HR department, or they used to. At this point, staff is doing that. And so I think that's the question. What should be the role in the personnel board? What information does the personnel board need to look at that? It does take training, and understanding the whole organization and all that to do it. So then what can we provide you that you feel comfortable approving it?
The other aspect here that Joe sort of, I think, touched on is the fact that we will have current data shortly. But 9 months from now, that current data is 9 months old. So if we're presented with a job description and we're questioning where and why did you put that particular job into that particular classification, the data, unless we in the personnel board expect the Human Resources Organization to go out and to get new data, we are left with the data that was prepared 9 months ago, and then I think the term is called aging. Then you age that data based on the length of time in order to update this. So I'm just trying to respond, I think, to Joe's point about looking for more information about that currently we don't ask for. And as we look ahead, we just need to be thinking about what is the data that we would like.
Right, and a primary factor in placing positions into the classification plan is internal equity. And we do not gather market data for every single position. One, not every single position is a benchmark. So we gather benchmark data. At times we watch the benchmarks and we build ranges off of those. And we place positions based on the internal equity. Now, if we had a position that, you know, just has a very different market, we've got to figure out what to do about it, but it's still got to go back to internal equity. That's always what we worked for, and now it's the law. So we really, yes, data is used for which positions and at what stages and how. It has a lot of different factors, but no, every time we classify a position and I bring one, I have not been going out and getting data for every single one of those because it was about the internal.
Right.
Except that I don't have some sense of what a position like that might pay, but I've got to.
Well, I think it's important that this will be in the minutes as it reflects how significant the internal equity piece really is in the entire decision making. Not like it was a decade ago, or maybe even 2 years or 5 years ago, but any other comments from the personnel board about anything that we've talked about so far? We still need to, have you completed, Amy, your discussion of the schedule 7-1 and 7-2? Are we through with? So are we through with that or okay?
On a general basis, the way that we've been doing it, I'm happy to go into anyone further if there's something you wanted to know about it, but that's the approach that we've used and what we're requesting is to make sure that brings to us. Yeah.
I just have, says it's, you know, new information, so I'm curious about, I've got all my pages mixed up. This thing, the diving folks that you said you outsourced, and I assume that's a contract. So do you know how they're paid on an hourly basis, and how does that look with internal equity? Does it come into that decision making because they are an external body, right? So they probably make those decisions on their own, right?
So I can't speak to the larger internal equity of the town, but this vendor rents space for his dive team. And part of the rental, he allows us to have participants come and learn from him. So it's a space rental relationship more than, I use the word vendor because that's a word that most people are comfortable with, but so he rents our space. We're a unique facility in that there's not many other municipal pools, especially those with dive boards and dive wells. So we have a lot of folks that are interested in coming to use our space, and Joe has been with us for years and years and years, and has been a great steward of the BD Center and of our participants.
Terrific. Okay, thank you very much.
So I will entertain a motion for approval of, we need to have 2 different approvals. Is that right, Amy? One on schedule 7-1 and one on, or, okay. So do I have someone to move that we adopt schedule 7-1 and 7-2?
So moved.
All right, we have this moved with a second. Joe is seconded.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And so now we will vote on the motion. Approval of 7-1 and 7-2 that was discussed this evening. So all in favor, I'm gonna start with,
Roll call?
yes, we're gonna start, yeah.
Sorry,
yeah,
I thought you were gonna-
yeah, we're gonna start with Joe,
I'll approve.
okay, and Kate,
Yes.
all right. Liz
Yes,
and Bill, yes, all right. So that miscellaneous compensation schedule update has been approved.
Yeah, no problem.
So we're going to move on to item 4. Preparation of warrant articles for 2023. And based on our last meeting, it was acknowledged that we would have an informal discussion that would take place with the town moderator, the town manager, and Liz and myself, which took place. Who am I missing? Oh, it ain't. Oh, Terry. Yeah, Terry and Amy. So that informal discussion took place, sort of talking through various options as it reflects the existence or non-existence of having a completed compensation report from GovHR, and understanding the limitations that it imposes on a warrant being presented. So I think the discussion was quite helpful. Obviously, the town moderator, being as knowledgeable as she is, I think was quite good at giving us a good footing as terms of what can and what can't be done, so to speak. And in essence, and I'll obviously let anyone else comment. We have Carrie LaFleur, the town manager, here as well, which thank you for coming, because I think this particular item may generate some question or discussions from the public. But we're going to essentially have 3 warrant articles that will come from the personnel board. And one will be the traditional ratification of the reclassifications and that have taken place during the year, new job titles, new classification levels that need the town meeting approval in order for those particular items to be ratified. Are we talking what, 20, 25, or how many do you think? 10?
The 5 states, and then it says, we always have a ability to,
Okay, right.
that kind of deal.
Right, okay. And then because we are not certain exactly when we're going to be able to get the final report from GovHR in a time in which the town has its opportunity to review the data in order to present it to the personnel board for its review, those dates at this moment, we do not have, to be able to articulate exactly when that's going to happen. So we're going to need to have essentially 2 warrant articles, one that takes into account that, we just don't have a new classification and compensation system that has been truly vetted by all parties, meaning the town, the personnel board, the citizens, employees. I mean, this is an all-inclusive sort of effort. So we need to have a fallback if in fact we do not have a completed new system. And that essentially would be to take last year's article and increase and include whatever increase is finally approved for salary increases on the 1st of July, 2023. That decision still has to be made and is in the process of discussion and so forth. Right. And then the other warrant article, which we will have to have and prepare, is one that essentially addresses the fact this is the new system. We have a new system. We have the data from GovHR. We have their recommendations. We've had an opportunity to vet, to ask questions, and we're thoroughly convinced that this is a new system that we should, we're glad to have and we'll have in place. I hope it will last for 3 years before we have another study. But anyway, so that's a third warrant article that needs to be prepared. Is there what have I missed here?
Well, points about that third article is, just to be clear, the wording would be different because we're not going to be at a point different than what we've been doing and what we would do with Article 2, or the second one. So this would be something that is more of a narrative that describes the intent to adopt and the process that will be used. And this may be really what you were saying, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, that it would not have the titles and the ranges and all that. It describes the intent. And what we talked about with the moderator was that there are several stages where the information can be presented to the public. So one, and the article can say this, is that at the public hearing, as much as available at that point will be presented and provided. And she would say that if there were some things, the areas that still needed work, that could be described, that we can make sure people know where there's a website, that when something's available, we can put it out there. There is the finance committee report that gets prepared going into to this process, which is another opportunity where the warrant is that it gets printed and additional materials, so we can print something there and what stage we're at. And then ultimately, through motions, which we need to have motions before town meeting, but we can have motions, and that could be handouts for town meeting. So how involved each one depends on the stage we're at. You know, we're coming along very, I think we're coming along well, but what we don't know is how many questions there will be, how many employees might want to review it. So we need to have that ability to work that out, and we can work within that time frame. But we also have a contingency plan, as you said, Bill, which is that other article that takes the current schedules and applies what often people refer to as a COLA. We're trying not to use that because it's not directly, that's a base wage adjustment. That we should talk about the amount here. We want to at least be able to provide that to employees. Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very helpful to clarify what I said.
Sorry, I got more confused actually. So can I have
Sure.
a stab at that? So I am looking back at my handwritten notes, which are very messy, but I don't see the word motion anywhere. So what I did see as a summary is that there are the three that Bill outlines, and in the third that there's some time issues with it, right? Because we don't have all the information now. And so the original article deadline, or draft article deadline of the 16th couldn't be met because HR is still working. Same thing for January 4th. So we talked, my understanding that we talked about getting something more robust for number 3 by February 27th, which is a meeting with the select board, but it's called something specific. The public hearing. And then the FinCom report in April, the first week in April, we would hope to have more information at that point. And at that point, my understanding was that we would have titles and ranges potentially in there by the FinCom report. And if that's possible, then we go forward with the third article. We don't go with the second article. But if it's not possible, then we don't. We stick with the second article, but one of them doesn't go forward, right?
So
And
the two pieces related to that. One, of the motions then come at the final piece at the town meeting. And yes, we would have had to have put forth tables and all, but at that point, I think what we talked about is that there could be smaller changes within the scope of it. Like there might be, tweak this title or move this position from that grade to another.
What's
For the motions for town meeting.
okay, so in the town meeting itself, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, motions that you worked on beforehand. So I think that was the other part of the discussion. Not
Sorry,
that that's
what
when
were
we're
the dates about
unveiling
motions?
this.
I'm not clear on that. I didn't have that in my notes from yesterday. So motions for the town meeting that have to be put in prior to town meeting, what
Yeah,
are the
she
deadlines on
gave
it?
us a specific date. I think she talked about this usually about 2 weeks before town meeting. Okay.
Okay,
And then in terms of in terms of the article with the current schedule with an increase, We might not move it, but there could be, one of the things that I was touching on, is there could be some benefit to putting that in place to allow every employee to at least get 3% this year, even if their range under the new schedule ends up being lower than their current rate of pay. That's when we have like a redlining situation or personal rate. What we were thinking about is that that would be difficult for somebody to have happened this year with no warning. And so there could be some benefit in applying the 3% this year and then putting the personal rate into effect with the implementation of the new schedule. And next year, they wouldn't be able to get an increase unless somehow the range went up. It's until the range catches up with that. So I can see that it might be helpful to actually move both of these, one to go in effect, like let's say June 30 and the other one July 1. That allows us to do that. I just don't want us to not be able to give employees an increase.
That particular decision will get made, obviously, as we go through time here. And certainly, the town manager would have was clearly a say in terms of what might be recommended. And then we have the personnel board's, reaction, opinion, that would be obviously entertained by the town manager and moderator and so forth. So, but I think we have at least a skeleton outline of what our thinking is, what the strategy is going forward here. Any other comments? I mean, we'll certainly should probably entertain any comments from the public, anyone who is. Okay, I don't see any comments. Okay, so anything else? So we've got here next steps. And anybody have any thoughts on what they think of next steps or what we might want to articulate as next steps or deliverables or milestones? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Is it necessary? Would it be helpful?
Well, it seems like it's all dependent on what comes out of GovHR. Is that basically which article we're gonna go with, although there's the concept of doing both to ensure that employees get an increase. So I'm not sure what next steps would be.
Well, I guess what I was thinking about, and that you've raised a good point, is that the next steps with respect to that we would actually be in a position to move forward at town meeting with the new classification system.
Okay.
So in order to get to that, you'd have to back up in terms of what decisions are going to have to be made prior to the town meeting that are important to make certain happen. Personnel board review, town citizen review, employee review, or what I know, that's not a good term. But my point is, would it be helpful to have these deliverables, these milestones? So then it would give us a somewhat of a sense as to, okay, really, what do we need to plan for? And it also, planning also means communication and communicating. I mean, I think, I want to come back to communicating as it relates to the schedule 7.1 and 7.2, but right now just the communication piece, I think in the past, all right, we've learned from the past that we need to be more conscious and more aware of what it looks like. What is the plan? And who is responsible for implementing the communication plan? And what is the communication plan? So anyway, there are various steps that need to be considered. So I thought that maybe, not that we need to spend time right now, maybe each of us can has his homework assignment is, okay, if you understand what I'm trying to do, which is, let's take the fact that the assumption is we're going to have something new. what has to happen in order for that to take place at town meeting? What are the steps?
And Kelly and I did meet with Joellen, who's on HR today. We were outlining a number of those things and working into the schedule, given the meeting yesterday with the moderator and looking at all these dates where we're doing that. And we have a meeting with Carrie LaFleur next week, where we're also going to be working with her on some of that. So we also will come back to you with more of those details and what those milestones are, or what we have to get to in our proposal. And I think that would include meetings with employees, letters to employees, meetings with the personnel board, number of tasks.
Well, it seems to me that if any member of the personnel board now has any sort of ideas or thoughts about what might be as a deliverable, please forward those on to Amy, so that she can perhaps consider incorporate whatever. So this is not a must on the part of the personnel board, but if any of us, I think, have any ideas about what should be included, let's communicate those to Amy. Okay. The one thing, and I know I didn't, I should have said this to schedules 7.1 and 7.2, but communication. I think there has to be, and maybe this has already been done, but how are you going to communicate this to the people affected? And perhaps even to all employees, in a way that's, constructive and in a way that makes sense, and, that it can't be too complicated, but again, I guess I'm really going to harp on this communication, because it certainly has been an issue. And we just need, from the personnel board standpoint, I think, to keep plugging away at trying to make certain that when we have an opportunity to talk about communication, that we talk about it. And if it's necessary for a plan to be developed, then we would ask that to take place. But anyway, so my point is, has there been any thought about this, the communicating the 7.1, 7.2?
Yeah, well, what I tell you is that that schedule sometimes gets updated many times throughout the year. It's very different than the regular status schedule. And the types of employees it impacts, again, as they discussed before, varies widely. So we have not communicated that to all employees. Most employees wouldn't, it doesn't relate to their position, so we haven't done that. What we would do is communicate to the affected employees. So what I do is I take all of that, I run the list, we see who's doing it, we work with the department heads. And in many cases, this isn't going to impact anybody in those jobs. It's more likely, like I said, the library positions are the most likely. So I'll be working with the library director. That's a very general response. It's targeted to how many changes we had in this particular time, who it impacts, that sort of thing. But I don't have a boilerplate letter that would work for all of them.
I guess my sense, or my only concern is, we think about it.
Yeah.
And even think about the fact that, and this goes back to the employee appeal, is that we know that we need to provide whatever assistance to the people, to managers, supervisors, whatever. It's got to be more than just a meeting, and hopefully that the people who listen to that will then go to the employees affected and say the same thing. I mean, I think we learned from that situation that, it wasn't done as nicely, as positively as it should have been done. So I'm only suggesting again that as we continue to make decisions that affect employees, and communication is a vital part of that, that we consider what our options are. And even to the point of giving a script to the manager, who then hands the script out to his subordinate managers or whatever, so that the same language, the same message is communicated. Anyway, I don't mean to overdo that, but it's I think we have a lot to learn from this, the task force study and our own experience, my own experience on the personnel board, so. Okay, I guess we are finished then with item 4. We can go to item 5. Unless the town manager has any, we don't want to exclude you. Okay, so we're moving on to the classification and compensation study update.
Actually, there's. Did you get to which?
Oh.
The base wage increase for the next fiscal year, we were talking about applying an amount. As you saw from last year and some other years, sometimes we do it across the board, the same move, and other times we've had ranges that have moved a different amount, which is what came up with the line workers and the electrical management. We're not proposing doing anything like that. That should only come out of the study, right? This year, this is all about the study. Those were in between things. So the proposed base wage increase for this year is 3%. That is based on settlements with unions as well that happened, gosh, over a year ago now, I think, or about a year ago. It's based on the town manager's budget and what's been being taken into consideration there. Ultimately, what employees in the schedule and regular status non-union would get is all going to depend on the new classification and compensation plan. But what we're recommending is a minimum of a 3% base wage adjustment applied to every range, and that be what would be printed in Article 2, or keep calling it Article 2. I'm sorry, the second article, and that the basis that the consultant works off of when setting ranges, you have to kind of look at how is the data moved. All the other towns may be, also moving, so you have to build in a factor there. 3% is the factor that we would be working with a consultant to build in.
Okay. All right.
I have a question. So how many folks are at the top of their range and wouldn't get the 3% increase?
Well, they would get the 3%. So by doing this, that means everybody gets that increase.
Despite going out of their range?
Because the range moves, so if they're at the max now and the range goes up 3%, then they have the
I'm
ability
sorry,
to-
I thought you were saying the salary increase. I wrote down the wrong words then. So you're saying not an increase, a base wage increase, but it's a salary range
salary
increase.
range, right?
So I'll take out base wage increase and salary range.
Well, those are the base salary ranges.
Okay,
But the point, and I think this is a really good one,
Yeah.
that Liz needs, we all need to fully understand, is that we're talking about everyone having a 3% pay increase on
Right.
July 1st.
Pay
Yeah.
increases get set after town meeting. Okay, so there's the ranges, and what we're talking about here is moving the ranges. The amount of the increases depends on the budget and what's available and what salary increase policy is adopted by the town manager and the personnel board after town meeting. So we won't know that until the spring. And we know what target is and that we're working with that, but we're also going to take into account whatever's available in the budget. We're implementing a new classification and compensation plan. How does that work? Are we trying to fit people into that? Are they running up into new maxes? There's still a lot of pieces to that. So this is just about those ranges, and we'd like to have the ability to provide everybody with at least 3%. The only way to be sure that we're going to be able to provide that is to
ratify them.
is to change those ranges.
Okay, so,
That's
but I just,
okay.
just to make sure that I'm on board and
Yeah.
the notes are correct, it's a proposed base salary range across the board is 3%. Okay. All right, so I have the correct wording.
Yeah, probably.
All right, and then Bill, you had the question, pay increase also at 3%, and the amount of the increase won't be clear until the spring. That's when town manager and personnel board has some action there as well. in the
Right.
spring after town meeting.
You'd adopt, right, you'd adopt a personnel policy for the coming fiscal year.
When do you think that would take place? Just
It
roughly?
usually happens around May.
May, okay, well, we can put that in the minutes.
Joe has a question.
Yes, Joe, please.
That was fast. Uh, So just quick question, I think probably for Amy, and you may have said this. The 3%, I think I heard that was based partially on budget from the town manager. I'm just curious what else goes into, making the range decision, and it might, just for me, as I'm kind of learning, as I mentioned before, is there any historical context that might help me frame up, like, is 3% normal, or has the town done less or more in the past, just to give me a sense of how to feel about that?
Right, so there's no, it does vary every year. I would say in recent years, we've seen, 2%, things like that. There was some impact from the pandemic as well. There are several things that go into consideration. The budget, what we know about what's happening in other towns and what they're doing. Thinking about inflation and cost of living types of things that are going on. And I'm missing something. And then a key, particularly this year, and each year there can be a little bit of a, different influence, but this year it's the union settlements. And so, the prior town manager settled contracts with, say, the library unions and the highway and ground unions, and that included 3% based on what we had for information there and working to catch up after the pandemic. And so we would want to be consistent on why that's the basis this year. In some years, we're going to be looking more at other types of data, because if years are going to go by, we're going to be looking at some of the benchmarks or gathering more salary information. That's happening through the study this year. So we're not separately doing that and making any other recommendations till we get through that study piece.